New York City pulled on its nightly shroud of concrete and shadow a sprawling map of light and dark. A nondescript black van ghosted through the deserted canyons of the Bronx, its headlights slicing through the urban gloom. The atmosphere inside was thick with a toxic blend of ambition and fear. Elizabeth Liz Harding, flawless in a tailored suit that screamed Wall Street, kept her icy gaze locked on the rain-slicked road. Beside her, Dr. Peterson fumbled nervously with a syringe, the liquid within it catching an ominous gleam from the passing streetlights. In the back, a still figure lay inert, his shallow, ragged breaths the only proof of life. Richard Rick Harding, once a lion of industry, a titan of Harding Tech, was now just a broken echo of the man he'd been. The van screeched to a halt, its tires protesting loudly against the pavement. Liz turned, her face an unreadable sculpture of cold resolve. "Here, Letton, do this quickly." "Doctor." Peterson's hand trembled, his fingers clenching the syringe. "Emily, are you sure this is necessary?" She sliced through his hesitation with a voice as sharp as broken glass. "Do it." The doctor swallowed, the sound loud in the tense silence, and plunged the needle into Rick's unresisting arm. The unconscious man's eyes fluttered open for a disoriented moment, then slid shut again. With a chilling, mechanical efficiency, Liz and Dr. Peterson hefted Rick's dead weight out of the van, propping him against a grimy brick wall covered in a mural of angry, spray-painted tags. His state-of-the-art carbon fiber wheelchair was tossed next to him, a cruel, metallic footnote to his fall from grace. Liz stared at her husband for a long, unreadable moment. Then, without a single word, she pivoted and slid back into the driver's seat. The van melted back into the night, leaving only the fading growl of its engine. Rick remained, a tragic silhouette against the city's underbelly, his head lolled to one side as incoherent words spilled from his lips. The man who once commanded an empire from a midtown skyscraper couldn't even recall his own name. Hours bled into one another as the night gave way to the cold, gray light of a Manhattan dawn. The city began to stir, the distant symphony of traffic building to its daily crescendo. But in the alley, time was a frozen, forgotten thing. That was when two pairs of wide, curious eyes peered from behind a dumpster. Madison Maddie, aged 10, held the hand of her younger sister, Ella, aged 8. The girls watched the motionless figure with a practiced caution. Sarah Amy whispered, her voice trembling with both fear and curiosity. "Do you think he's dead?" Maddie's brow furrowed, her sharp gaze taking in every detail of the scene. "No, look, he's still breathing." They edged closer, their worn sneakers silent on the damp ground. They saw the expensive suit, now soiled and rumpled, the sleek wheelchair, the man's pale, sweat-sheened face. Ella knelt, her large eyes filled with a concern that belied her harsh life. "Sir, are you okay?" Rick stirred, his eyes opening slowly. He looked at the girls, his stare vacant, utterly lacking recognition. Where am I?" he rasped, his voice a dry whisper. Maddie and Ella shot each other a look. This was wrong, deeply wrong. "You're in an alley," Maddie answered, her voice careful. "What's your name?" Rick's face twisted, a flicker of panic in his eyes. I don't know. Why don't I know my name?" Ella's compassion won out over her fear as she knelt beside him. "It's okay, we'll help you." Maddie watched, her street-smart mind, already calculating the odds, working furiously. The man was in trouble, but bringing a total stranger to their hideout was a massive risk. Still, leaving him here. "Amy," she called softly, "come here for a minute." The sisters huddled together, a flurry of urgent whispers passing between them. Rick watched them, his mind a fog, fragments of memory dancing just beyond his grasp. Finally, Maddie nodded, her decision made. She turned back to Rick, her voice firm despite her youth. "We'll help you, but you have to trust us, okay?" Rick nodded slowly, grateful for any lifeline in the overwhelming sea of his confusion. Maddie took control of the wheelchair's handles while Ella took Rick's hand, offering a small, reassuring smile. Slowly, this unlikely trio began their journey through the labyrinth of back streets and forgotten passages. Maddie led with confidence, her eyes constantly scanning for danger. Ella kept up a stream of gentle chatter, as much to soothe her own nerves as Rick's. As they moved, the city around them awoke. Sleepy commuters clutched coffee cups, shopkeepers rolled up security gates, yet no one paid any mind to the disoriented man in the expensive wheelchair being guided by two small, ragged girls. At last, after what felt like an eternity, they reached a derelict warehouse on the waterfront. With practiced ease, Maddie pried away a loose section of corrugated metal, revealing a hidden opening. "This is it," she announced, her voice a mix of pride and caution. Rick stared at the dilapidated structure, a pang of something, familiarity, fear, cutting through the fog. "It'll be okay," Ella assured him, squeezing his hand. "This is our secret fortress." As the girls carefully maneuvered him inside, Rick felt a strange cocktail of emotions: terror of the unknown, immense gratitude for the kindness of these children, and a deep, inexplicable sadness. The makeshift door closed behind them, sealing them off from the outside world. In the dusty silence of the abandoned warehouse, a new journey was about to begin, a journey of discovery, healing, and perhaps redemption. Rick Harding didn't know who he was, where he was from, or what tomorrow held. But as he looked at the hopeful faces of Maddie and Ella, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Whoever he was no longer alone. And so, in that improbable moment, in an improbable place, with the most improbable companions, the next chapter of Richard Harding's life began, a chapter none of them could ever have predicted, but one that would change all their lives forever. The inside of the abandoned warehouse was a maze of shadows and silence. Maddie guided Rick's wheelchair with practiced skill, navigating narrow passages and dodging piles of debris with an ease that spoke of deep familiarity. Ella walked beside Rick, her small hand resting comfortingly on his arm. "Almost there," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Rick observed it all through a haze, his mind a swirling fog. Fragments of memory danced at the edges of his consciousness. A glass-walled office with a view of Central Park, the scent of expensive leather, the distant sound of applause. But it all felt like a movie about someone else's life. Finally, they reached a larger open space. It had once been a loading bay, but now served as their makeshift sanctuary. Stacks of wooden pallets acted as furniture, a pile of worn-out blankets sat in a corner, and a few half-melted candles provided a faint, flickering light. "Welcome to our palace," Maddie announced, a note of pride in her voice. Rick looked around, struggling to process the scene. "You live here?" Ella nodded, her smile unwavering. "It's our home sweet home. It's not much, but it's safe." The girls began to move with practiced efficiency, rearranging their space to accommodate Rick and his wheelchair. Maddie cleared a space by shoving some crates aside, while Ella fetched extra blankets. Rick watched them, a wave of gratitude mixed with guilt washing over him. I don't want to be a burden," he muttered. Maddie paused, her gaze surprisingly intense for her age. "You're not a burden. We all need help sometimes." While the girls worked, Rick closed his eyes, trying to force order on his chaotic thoughts. Suddenly, an image seared itself into his mind. A woman's face, beautiful and cold, looking at him with utter contempt. He gasped, his eyes flying open. "Are you okay?" Ella asked, her voice laced with concern. Rick shook his head, trying to grasp the memory as it faded. "I saw someone, a woman, but I can't remember who she is." Maddie and Ella exchanged a look. "Maybe she's someone from your family," Maddie suggested cautiously. The word family triggered another cascade of jumbled images in Rick's mind. A vast, empty penthouse, the echo of distant laughter, an overwhelming sense of loneliness. He pressed his hands to his temples, groaning softly. Ella offered him a plastic cup of water. "Here, drink this, it'll help." Rick took it, his hands trembling as he drank. Another flash. A boardroom, raised voices, numbers scrolling across a massive screen. He nearly choked, coughing. "Easy," Maddie instructed, her voice surprisingly authoritative. "Take a deep breath." The hours crawled by. Rick drifted between moments of relative clarity and periods of profound confusion. The girls remained by his side, offering comfort and aid with a maturity that defied their years. As night fell, Maddie lit a few more candles, their flames casting dancing shadows on the graffiti-scarred walls. Ella had curled up in a blanket near Rick, fast asleep. "You should rest too," Maddie said softly to Rick. "Tomorrow's another day." Rick nodded, the weight of exhaustion settling deep into his bones. But as he closed his eyes, more shards of memory assaulted him. A signature on a major contract, the cool metal of a wedding band, the piercing screech of twisting metal. He woke with a jolt, a cold sweat plastering his hair to his forehead. Maddie was instantly there, a calm presence in the dark. "Nightmare?" she asked simply. Rick nodded, unable to articulate the vortex of emotions and images tormenting him. Maddie sat beside him, her small hand finding his in the gloom. "You know," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "when Amy and I ended up on the streets, I had nightmares every night. I'd dream about our mom, leaving us about the dangers of the city. But over time, I learned that nightmares are just the dreams, they can't really hurt us." Rick listened, a wave of admiration washing over him for this child, so young and yet so wise. How did you two end up here?" he asked, his voice hesitant. Maddie was quiet for a moment, as if weighing her words. "Our mom abandoned us," she finally said. "One day she took us to the park, said she was going to buy ice cream and never came back." Rick's heart constricted at the brutal simplicity of the story. "I'm sorry," he murmured. Maddie shrugged, a gesture that seemed far too adult for her small shoulders. "It's okay, we have each other and now we have you too." The words hung in the air, heavy with a significance none of them was fully prepared for. Rick felt a mixture of gratitude and fear. Gratitude for the children's kindness, fear of the unknown that stretched before him. "Thank you," he finally managed, his voice thick with emotion. "For everything." Maddie squeezed his hand gently. "Rest now? Tomorrow we'll try to find out more about who you are." As Rick finally succumbed to sleep, his mind still a whirlwind of fractured memories, he clung to a single certainty. However terrifying and uncertain the future was, he was no longer alone. In the quiet of the night, in an abandoned warehouse in the heart of the city, an unlikely family rested. Maddie, the vigilant protector, Ella, the kind soul, and Rick, the man with no past but, perhaps, just maybe, a future. Dawn would bring new challenges, new discoveries, but for now, wrapped in a protective darkness and warmed by a shared companionship, they found a moment of peace in the chaos of their lives. Dawn filtered through the grimy, cracked windows of the warehouse, painting the interior with soft strokes of light. Rick blinked, his eyes adjusting slowly to the dimness. For a moment, he was disoriented, until the events of the previous night came rushing back in a confusing wave. Maddie was already awake, quietly organizing their meager belongings. She saw Rick stirring and came over. "Good morning," she said softly. "How are you feeling?" Rick frowned, trying to assess his own mental state. "I think a bit better, less confused." Maddie nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "That's good. Want to try eating something?" While Maddie prepared a makeshift breakfast of stale bagels and slightly bruised apples, Rick closed his eyes and focused. Images began to coalesce in his mind, clearer now. A spacious corner office overlooking the city, a polished mahogany desk, the solid weight of an expensive pen in his hand, signing important documents. "I think," he began hesitantly, opening his eyes. "I think I was a businessman, someone important." Maddie paused what she was doing, giving him her full attention. "Do you remember anything specific?" Rick concentrated again. "A name, Harding, does that mean anything to you?" Maddie's eyes widened. "Thompson, like Thompson Tech, that big technology company?" Just then, Ella woke up, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. "What's going on?" Maddie quickly filled her in. The two girls stared at Rick with a mixture of awe and curiosity. "If you're really Robert Thompson," Maddie said slowly, "then you're kind of a billionaire." Rick felt a wave of vertigo. Fragments of memory began to slot into place. Board meetings, product launches, television interviews. But it all felt remote, like it had happened to someone else. I don't feel like a billionaire," he muttered. Ella came closer, offering him a piece of bagel. "Billionaire or not, you still need to eat?" The simple gesture, the child's genuine care, brought tears to Rick's eyes. "Thank you," he said, his voice cracking. As they ate, Rick began to ask about the girls' lives. Maddie and Ella, hesitant at first, gradually opened up. "After our mom left us," Maddie explained, "we wandered the streets for a while. It was scary." Ella nodded, her eyes distant. "We were hungry all the time and cold and scared." Rick listened, his heart tightening with every detail of the harsh reality these children had faced. "How did you survive?" he asked gently. Maddie shrugged, a gesture heavy with experience. "We learned fast where to find food, where it was safe to sleep, how to go unnoticed." "Sarah's really smart," Ella added proudly. "She always knows what to do." Rick looked at the two sisters, astonished by their resilience and the powerful bond between them. Another flash of memory struck him, the profound loneliness of a large, empty penthouse, the echo of distant arguments. "I think," he said slowly, "that I never had anyone like that in my life, no one who really cared." The girls exchanged a look, a silent conversation passing between them. "Well," Ella said finally, her face lighting up with a smile, "now you do." The simplicity and sincerity of the statement moved Rick profoundly. He felt a wave of gratitude and something else, a budding sense of purpose he couldn't yet define. As the day wore on, more memories surfaced. Rick recalled business meetings, major decisions hammered out in boardrooms. But he also recalled lonely nights, a marriage that felt more like a business merger than a partnership. "There was a woman," he said at one point, his forehead creased in concentration. "My wife, I think Emily, but she didn't seem happy." Maddie listened intently, her sharp eyes weighing every word. "Do you remember what happened to you, how you ended up in that alley?" Rick closed his eyes, trying to focus. Confusing images flashed through his mind. A heated argument, the cold glint of a syringe, the feeling of falling into a bottomless darkness. "I'm not sure," he admitted finally, "but I have the feeling that I was betrayed by someone close to me." A heavy silence fell over the small group, thick with the implications of that partial memory. "Well," Maddie said at last, her voice resolute, "it doesn't matter what happened before. What matters is what we do now." Ella nodded vigorously. "That's right, and we'll help you, Mr. Robert. I promise." Rick looked at the two girls, feeling a rush of emotions: gratitude, admiration, and a growing sense of responsibility. These children, who had endured so much, were willing to risk everything to help him. "You two are incredible," he said softly. "I don't know how to thank you." Maddie smiled, a smile that seemed far older than her years. "No need to thank us, that's what family does." The word family echoed in Rick's mind, stirring a complex mix of feelings. He realized that for all his past wealth and success, he may never have truly understood what it meant to have a family. As the day wound down, Rick found himself reflecting on the strange detours fate can take. He had lost his memory, his identity, everything he thought had defined him. But here, in this unlikely place with these unlikely children, he was discovering parts of himself he never knew existed. Night fell over the city, shrouding the abandoned warehouse in shadow. Yet within its peeling walls, a light of hope was beginning to glow. Rick, Maddie, and Ella settled into their makeshift corners, each lost in thought but united by a bond that grew stronger by the hour. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new memories, perhaps even new dangers. But for now, in this moment of quiet, they had found something precious, a sense of belonging, a shared purpose. And to Rick, that felt worth more than all the billions he might have lost. Morning sunlight glinted off the mirrored windows of the skyscraper housing Harding Tech's headquarters. On the 50th floor, Elizabeth Liz Harding adjusted her immaculate power suit before stepping into the boardroom. Her face was a mask of studied concern, but her eyes held the gleam of barely concealed ambition. The room was tense, filled with nervous executives and board members whispering amongst themselves. Liz walked to the head of the table, her presence alone silencing the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice firm but with a calculated tremor of emotion. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. As you know, these past few weeks have been challenging for Thompson Tech." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Anxious faces stared back at her, hungry for answers. "Unfortunately," Liz continued, "I have concerning news about my husband Robert. His condition following the accident has deteriorated significantly." A ripple of worried murmurs went through the room. Tom Baker, Rick's best friend and the company's COO, leaned forward, concern etched on his features. "Emily, what exactly does that mean?" Liz heaved a dramatic sigh, pulling a folder from her briefcase. "The doctors have confirmed our worst fears. Robert is mentally incapacitated." She opened the folder, revealing a sheaf of official-looking documents. "I have here medical reports detailing Robert's condition. He suffers from severe confusion memory loss and is incapable of making even basic decisions, let alone leading a corporation like Thompson Tech." The room erupted in agitated chatter. Liz let the chaos swell for a moment before raising a hand for silence. "I understand this is shocking to all of you, believe me. No one is more devastated than I am, but we must think about the future of this company, our employees, our investors." Tom stood up, his face a mixture of disbelief and suspicion. "Emily, this is hard to believe. Robert has always been so strong, so resilient. Are you sure these reports are accurate?" Liz shot Tom a frosty glare. "Are you questioning the integrity of reputable doctors, Jack, or are you implying I would lie about my own husband's condition?" Tom backed down, clearly unsettled. "No, and of course not. It's a shock." Liz softened her expression, turning to the rest of the board. "I know you're all worried, but now more than ever, we need to stand together. Thompson Tech needs strong, decisive leadership." She paused strategically, letting her words sink in. "That's why, with a heavy heart, I propose that we assume executive control of the company on Robert's behalf." The room exploded again in heated debate. Some executives looked skeptical, others were clearly in Liz's camp. Tom watched it all with a growing sense of distrust. Liz pressed on, her voice cutting through the noise. "I've already consulted our legal team with these medical reports. We have the legal basis for a temporary transfer of power. It's the only way to protect Robert's legacy and Thompson Tech's future." She passed out copies of the documents, watching each person's reaction. Most scanned the pages with expressions of shock and sorrow, but Liz saw the flicker of ambition in some eyes she knew she could manipulate. Tom was the first to break the silence. "Emily, this is a huge decision. Shouldn't we wait, give Robert some time to recover?" Liz shook her head sadly. "I wish we could, Jack, but the doctors were clear Robert's condition is permanent." She turned to face the room, her voice gaining strength. Ladies and gentlemen, I know this is difficult, but we have a responsibility to our shareholders, our employees, and to Robert himself. We can't let everything he built fall apart." One by one, the board members began to nod. Liz could see the internal battle on their faces, shock and sadness warring with pragmatism and ambition. "I propose a vote," she announced, "to confirm the temporary transfer of executive power to a committee led by me on Robert's behalf." The next few hours were a whirlwind of arguments, discussions, and backroom deals. Liz navigated it all with a combination of calculated charm and relentless determination. She knew precisely which buttons to push, which promises to make, which subtle threats to whisper. When the dust settled, the result was clear. By a narrow majority, the board had voted in her favor. As the room emptied, Tom approached Liz, his face grim, his eyes searching hers. "Emily, I've known Robert for years. None of this feels right." Liz placed a placating hand on Tom's arm, her voice soothing but with an undercurrent of steel. "I understand your concern, Jack, but I need you to trust me. This is for Robert's own good, for the good of the company. Are you with me?" Tom hesitated for a long moment before slowly nodding. "Yes, I'm with you for Robert's sake." Liz smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Great. Let's make Robert proud." As Tom walked away, Liz allowed a genuine, triumphant smile to spread across her face. Everything was falling into place. The first major hurdle was cleared. She walked to the window, gazing down at the city sprawled below. Somewhere out there, Rick was lost, confused, off the grid. And here she was, at the pinnacle of the empire he had built, poised to seize control. Liz took out her phone, dialing a familiar number. "Dr. Richards, it's done, the board approved. Prepare the next phase." She hung up, her eyes shining with victory. The game had only just begun, and Elizabeth Harding was determined to win at any cost. Detective Jack Rourke's office was an exercise in organized chaos. Piles of case files covered every available surface, the walls lined with newspaper clippings and photos from old cases. In the center of this whirlwind sat Rourke himself, a man in his 50s with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through people. The knock on his door broke the silence. "Come in," Rourke growled without looking up from the file he was studying. A woman entered, her elegant bearing at odds with the shabby surroundings. "Detective Miller, I'm Samantha Chen, executive assistant to Robert Thompson." Rourke finally raised his gaze, sizing up the newcomer. "Thompson, the tech tycoon." Jennifer nodded, taking the chair across from his desk. "Yes, and I'm afraid he's in danger." That got Rourke's full attention. He closed the file, focusing entirely on Jennifer. "Go on." "Robert disappeared weeks ago," Jennifer explained, her voice trembling slightly. "His wife Emily claims he's receiving treatment after an accident, but something doesn't add up. The stories aren't consistent, and nobody besides her has had any contact with him." Rourke frowned, his mind already starting to piece together a puzzle. "And why not go to the police?" Jennifer hesitated. "Emily has G connections, and without concrete proof, I'm afraid nothing will be done. I need someone who can investigate discreetly." Rourke leaned back in his chair, contemplating. Cases involving the rich and powerful were always complicated, often dangerous. But there was something in Jennifer's genuine concern that piqued his interest. "All right," he said finally. "I'll look into it, but I'm not promising anything." The relief on Jennifer's face was palpable. "Thank you, Detective. Here's everything I've gathered so far." She handed Rourke a thick folder. In the following days, he dove deep into Richard Harding's world. He scrutinized financial reports, discreetly interviewed employees, and watched Harding Tech from a distance. A pattern began to emerge: strange corporate decisions, suspicious money movements, and an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty within the company. The big break came when Rourke gained access to security cameras around the Harding mansion. After hours of reviewing footage, he saw it: a black van leaving the property late at night, around the date of Rick's supposed accident. Rourke tracked the van across the city, jumping from one camera to the next. The trail ended in a dark, isolated alley. Early the next morning, Rourke was in that alley, his experienced eyes scanning every detail. There wasn't much: trash, graffiti, the usual detritus of a neglected urban corner. But then something caught his eye. Half hidden behind a dumpster was a small piece of expensive fabric. Rourke examined it carefully, noticing stains that could be blood. "Bingo," he muttered. Rourke expanded his search, systematically covering the area. He questioned local homeless people, nearby shop owners, anyone who might have seen something on that fateful night. Most had nothing to offer. But one old homeless man, in exchange for a few dollars, shared a tantalizing detail. "I saw something strange that night," the man rasped. "A black van, 2 people were dragging something or someone. Kay looked heavy." Rourke felt his pulse quicken. "Did you see where they went?" The old man shook his head. "No, but there were 2 little girls around. They seem to be watching too. Haven't seen them since." This new piece of information opened another avenue of investigation. Rourke began looking for missing or runaway children in the area. He visited shelters, spoke with social workers, always keeping an eye out for 2 young sisters. Meanwhile, he continued to monitor Harding Tech from afar. Liz's actions were getting bolder, her grip on the company tightening by the day. One night, while reviewing his notes in his office, Rourke was interrupted by an urgent knock on the door. It was Jennifer, her face pale with worry. "Detective Miller, things are getting worse," she said as soon as she entered. "Emily is about to finalize a deal that would effectively give her total control of the company if we don't find Robert soon." Rourke nodded gravely. "I'm close to something, Samantha. I have a theory, but I need more time to confirm it." Jennifer looked like she wanted to say more, but was cut off by Rourke's phone ringing. "Miller," he answered brusquely. The voice on the other end was low and nervous. "Detective, this is Dr. Richards. I can't do this anymore. I need to tell the truth about Robert Thompson." Rourke motioned for Jennifer to keep quiet, putting the call on speaker. "I'm listening, Doctor." "It was Emily, do?" Richards said, his voice shaking. "She planned everything: the accident, the false medical reports, Robert's disappearance. I helped, God forgive me. I helped." Rourke and Jennifer exchanged stunned looks. "Where is Robert now, Doctor?" A long, tense pause. "I'm not sure exactly. We left him in an alley. He was alive but confused the drugs." Rourke felt a wave of anger, but kept his voice calm. "I need you to come to my office immediately. Dr. Richards, bring any evidence you have." After getting Rourke's address, Dr. Peterson hung up, promising to arrive in an hour. Rourke turned to Jennifer, his eyes shining with renewed determination. "The pieces are coming together, Samantha. I think I know where Robert might be, or at least where he ended up." Jennifer stood, her posture reflecting the urgency of the moment. "What do we do now?" Rourke grabbed his coat, checking his gun by habit. "Now we find Robert Thompson. Then we expose the truth, no matter who we have to face." As they left the office, the city night felt charged with possibilities and danger. Somewhere out there, Richard Harding was lost and confused. But now, at last, there was hope of bringing him back. Jack Rourke had a case to solve, and he wouldn't rest until the truth came out, no matter how powerful his enemies might be. Afternoon sunlight filtered through the dusty windows of the abandoned warehouse, casting dancing patterns on the peeling walls. Rick sat in his wheelchair, eyes closed in intense concentration. Maddie and Ella watched silently, exchanging worried glances. "It's coming back," Rick murmured, his brow knitted with effort. Fragments, pieces of the puzzle. Maddie stepped closer, cautious. "What are you seeing, Mr. Robert?" Rick opened his eyes, his gaze distant. "An office luxurious. Emily is there with a man, a doctor, I think." The memories came in vivid flashes. Liz, her face a mask of false concern, talking to a man in a white coat. "Are you sure this won't harm him permanently, Dr. Richards?" The doctor, nervous yet determined. "The effects will be temporary. He'll be confused, disoriented. Perfect for your purposes." Rick gasped, the realization of betrayal hitting him like a physical blow. "They drugged me, Emily." My own wife, she planned all of this. Ella approached, placing a comforting hand on Rick's arm. "That's terrible. Why would she do that?" Rick shook his head, more memories surfacing. The company, she wanted control of Thompson Tech. I was in the way. Maddie, ever the pragmatist, frowned. "So that means people must be looking for you, right? Your company, your friends." Rick pondered this for a moment. "Maybe, but Emily is clever. She's probably cooked up a convincing story to explain my absence." Meanwhile, across the city, Detective Jack Rourke sat in his car, parked across from a quiet cafe, his eyes fixed on the entrance. Finally, a nervous, middle-aged man hurried into the cafe. Rourke recognized him instantly from photographs. Dr. Peterson. Rourke entered the cafe quietly, seating himself across from the doctor. "Dr. Richards, I presume." The man jumped, clearly rattled. "Did Detective Miller—" "I'm not sure I should be here." Rourke kept his voice low and calm. "Doctor, you did the right thing by calling me. Now I need you to tell me everything about Robert Thompson." Dr. Peterson glanced around nervously before speaking. "It was Emily's idea. She wanted Robert out of the way. She asked me to create a drug cocktail that would leave him confused, disoriented." Rourke felt a surge of anger, but remained professional. "And where did you leave him exactly?" "An alley on the east side of the city," Dr. Peterson replied, his voice barely a whisper. But that was weeks ago. He could be anywhere by now. Rourke jotted down notes, his mind already planning the next steps. "I need everything you've got, Dr. Medical Records, communications with Emily, everything." Dr. Peterson nodded shakily, sliding a flash drive across the table. "It's all here. I'm so sorry. I never wanted things to go this far." Rourke took the drive, his face grim. "Justice will decide what to do with you, Doctor, for now. Stay available. I may need more information." Leaving the shaken doctor behind, Rourke exited the cafe, his mind buzzing with these new revelations. He had a rough location. Now he needed to find clues as to where Rick might have gone afterward. Back at the abandoned warehouse, Rick continued to wrestle with his returning memories. Each one brought a wave of emotion: anger, sadness, betrayal. "I built that company from nothing," he said, his voice trembling. "I devoted my life to it, and Emily, she threw it all away for greed." Maddie, revealing a maturity far beyond her years, placed a hand on Rick's. "Sometimes the people who should love us the most hurt us the worst, but that doesn't mean we're alone," Ella agreed enthusiastically. "That's right. You have us now. Mr. Robert, we're a family." The girl's words touched Rick deeply. Here he was, a man who once had everything, finding true compassion and loyalty in two homeless children. "You're right," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "We're a family, and together we'll figure out how to fix this." As night fell once more, Jack Rourke navigated the streets of the city's east side, eyes peeled for any sign of Rick or the two young sisters mentioned by the eyewitness. He stopped at a local shelter, showing photos of Rick and asking about two young sisters. The social worker shook her head. "Haven't seen anyone like that, but there are rumors about two girls living in one of the abandoned buildings nearby. They usually avoid the authorities." Rourke thanked her for the lead, his heart racing at the possibility of a solid clue. He began driving around the area, scouting abandoned buildings, looking for any signs of habitation. At one building, he noticed something: a loose board, carefully repositioned to look intact. It was the kind of trick street kids use to hide an entrance. Approaching cautiously, Rourke's instincts went on high alert. He heard muffled voices from inside, an adult male and two children's voices. His heart sped up. Could it be? Had he finally found Richard Harding? Rourke took a deep breath, preparing for whatever he might find. He knew he had to handle this carefully. If Rick was indeed inside, confused and possibly frightened, a wrong move could be disastrous. Slowly he approached the hidden entrance, ready at last to unravel the mystery of Richard Harding's disappearance. Inside the building, oblivious to the detective's presence, Rick, Maddie, and Ella continued to talk, planning their next move. The truth was about to surface, and none of them were prepared for the impact it would have on their lives. The silence of the abandoned warehouse was broken by the soft but distinct sound of cautious footsteps. Maddie noticed it first, her street-honed senses on full alert. She shot a signal to Ella, who immediately tensed. "Mr. Robert," Maddie whispered, "I think someone's here." Rick, still absorbed in his newly resurfaced memories, took a moment to register her words. When he did, a surge of adrenaline shot through him. "Do you have anywhere to hide?" he asked quietly. Ella pointed to an old wardrobe in the corner. "Over there, but we're not leaving you alone." Rick shook his head firmly. "Go now. I'll handle whoever it is." Reluctantly, the girls scurried into the wardrobe, leaving Rick alone in his wheelchair, facing the entrance. Jack Rourke inched closer to the makeshift door, his heart pounding. Years of experience told him this was a critical moment. He took a deep breath and knocked on the worn wood. "Hello?" he called out. "Is anyone in there? My name is Frank Miller. I'm a private detective." Inside, Rick felt a swirl of fear and hope. A detective? Could it be that someone was actually looking for him? "Come in," Rick replied, his voice steadier than he felt. Rourke gently pushed the door open and stepped into the dimly lit space. His eyes adjusted quickly, settling on the man in the wheelchair. Even with the scruffy beard and worn clothes, Rourke recognized the man from the photos he had studied so carefully. "Mr. Thompson?" Rourke asked, keeping his voice calm and his posture relaxed. Rick studied the man before him, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. "Who sent you? Was it Emily?" Rourke shook his head, taking a careful step forward. "No, Mr. Thompson. I was hired by Samantha Chen. Your assistant, she was worried about your disappearance." The name Jennifer triggered a reaction in Rick. Flashes of a loyal, efficient woman crossed his mind. "Samantha. Yes, I remember her. She was always trustworthy." Rourke nodded, sensing he was making progress. "Mr. Thompson, I know you must be confused and scared, but I'm here to help. I've discovered what Emily and Dr. Richards did." At the mention of Liz and the doctor, Rick stiffened visibly. "What do you know?" he asked, his voice laced with suppressed rage. Rourke took a deep breath before answering. "I know they drugged you, Mr. Thompson, that Emily is trying to take control of your company. Dr. Richards confessed everything." Rick closed his eyes, pain and anger washing over his face. When he opened them again, a fierce resolve gleamed there. "Prove it, prove I can trust you." Rourke nodded, understanding Rick's caution. He slowly pulled out his phone. "I have a recording of my conversation with Dr. Richards. Would you like to hear it?" Rick hesitated, then agreed. Rourke played the recording, and Dr. Peterson's quivering voice filled the room, confessing his role in Liz's scheme. As the recording played, Rick felt a storm of emotions, fury at the betrayal, sorrow at the broken trust, but also a growing sense of hope. Someone was truly on his side. When the recording ended, a heavy silence descended. Rourke waited patiently, giving Rick time to process. Finally, Rick spoke, his voice hoarse. "Okay, Mr. Miller, I believe you, but you need to understand I'm not alone here." Rourke frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Rick turned slightly in his chair. "Sarah, Amy, you can come out now, it's all right." To Rourke's astonishment, two young girls emerged from the old wardrobe. They positioned themselves protectively on either side of Rick, eyeing the detective with a mixture of fear and defiance. "This is Sarah and Amy," Rick explained, a gentle smile softening his tired features. They found me that night and have been taking care of me ever since they're well. They're my family now." Rourke looked at the unlikely trio, a surge of admiration rising within him. This was a story of compassion and loyalty he hadn't expected. "Nice to meet you girls," Rourke said kindly. "You did an amazing job looking after Mr. Thompson." Mattie, ever the protector, took a step forward. "What happens now? We're not letting anyone hurt Mr. Robert again." Rourke crouched to meet the girls at eye level. "I promise you both, I'm here to help. Mr. Thompson has been very brave, and so have you. Now we need to work together to make things right." Ella looked to Rick for guidance. Rick nodded gently. "It's okay, girls. I think we can trust Mr. Miller." Rourke stood up, his mind already clicking ahead. "Mr. Thompson, we need to get you out of here. It's crucial that you reclaim control of your company before Emily causes more damage." Rick nodded, though hesitation showed in his eyes. "What about the girls? I can't just leave them behind." Rourke looked from Rick to the girls, seeing the powerful bond they shared. "They'll come with us. Of course, we'll figure out a way to keep them safe and together." The relief on Rick's face was palpable. "Thank you, Mr. Miller. You have no idea what that means to us." Over the next few minutes, they gathered the few belongings Rick and the girls possessed. Rourke helped Rick while Mattie and Ella packed their carefully guarded treasures. As they prepared to leave, Rick paused, looking around the worn space he'd called home. "You know," he said softly, "strange as it sounds, I'll miss this place. It was here that I rediscovered what really matters in life." Mattie took Rick's hand, and Ella took his other. "No matter where we are," Mattie said with a wisdom beyond her years, "as long as we're together, we're home." Rourke watched the scene with a lump in his throat. In all his years as a detective, he'd never witnessed a bond so pure and genuine. "Let'n go," he said gently. "We have a long road ahead, but you're not alone on this journey anymore." As the peculiar group left the abandoned warehouse and stepped into the city night, a sense of anticipation hung in the air. The future was uncertain, full of challenges and potential dangers. But there was also hope. Hope for justice, for redemption, and for a new beginning. Richard Harding, the fallen magnate, two resilient street kids, and a determined detective, an unlikely family, brought together by fate and adversity. Together, they were about to face the world and reclaim what had been stolen. The real battle was just beginning. The hotel suite was a stark contrast to the abandoned warehouse Rick, Mattie, and Ella had called home. Rourke had chosen a discreet but comfortable place where they could regroup and plan. Rick, now shaved and in clean clothes, looked more like the CEO he once was. Sitting in his wheelchair by the window, he stared out at the city, his mind a maelstrom of thoughts. Mattie and Ella were perched on the edge of a plush sofa, still wide-eyed at the sudden luxury. Rourke paced back and forth, his face set in deep concentration. "Okay," Rourke began, stopping in the middle of the room. "We need a solid plan. Emily has the upper hand now, but we have the element of surprise." Rick nodded, turning to face the group. "First, we need solid proof. My word against Emily's won't be enough, especially if she's convinced the board I'm mentally unfit." "What about the documents Dr. Richards gave me?" Rourke asked, opening his laptop. "We have records of his communications with Emily, details about the drugs used. That's a start." Rick agreed, "But we need more. Emily's smart. She'll have covered her tracks carefully." Mattie, who had been listening intently, spoke up. "What if we could get Emily to confess like in the movies?" Rourke looked at the girl, a smile touching his lips. "For that's not a bad idea, if we could record Emily admitting her involvement." "But how?" Ella asked, her voice full of curiosity. "She won't just tell anyone the truth, will she?" Rick frowned, thinking. Maybe not to just anyone, but what if it was someone she trusts, someone she thinks is on her side? Rourke's eyes lit up with understanding. "Dr. Richards, he's already cooperating with us if we could convince him to wear a wire." That would be risky, Rick cautioned. If Emily finds out. It's a risk we have to take, Rourke said firmly. It's our best shot at irrefutable proof. While they hammered out the details of that plan across town, Liz Harding sat in her office at Harding Tech, savoring her apparent victory. "Gentlemen," she said, addressing a group of executives in her conference room, "I'm pleased to announce our new product line is ready to launch. Robert would be proud to see how smoothly we've kept the company running in his absence." Tom Baker, the COO, watched Liz with a mixture of admiration and suspicion. "Emily, don't you think we should wait for Robert's return before making such big decisions?" Liz gave Tom a chilly look. "Jack, we've been over this. The doctors said Robert's recovery will be long and uncertain. We can't leave the company in limbo." Tom reluctantly nodded, but the seed of doubt had been planted. After the meeting, Liz retreated to her private office. The moment the door closed, her polished facade crumbled. She grabbed her phone, dialing a familiar number. "Dr. Richards," she hissed into the phone. "We need to talk now." Back at the hotel, the plan was taking shape. Rourke had contacted Dr. Peterson, who, driven by guilt and fear, had agreed to cooperate. "Okay," Rourke said, hanging up the phone. "Richards is in. He'll meet with Emily tomorrow, wearing a microphone I'll provide." Rick nodded, a mix of relief and apprehension on his face. "What about the girls? We can't involve them in this. It's too dangerous." Maddie and Ella exchanged looks of protest, but Rourke spoke first. "Agreed. I have a friend, Lisa, a social worker. She can look after them while we handle this." The girls began to protest loudly, but Rick raised a hand, gently silencing them. "Girls, I know you want to help, and you've already helped more than you can imagine. But this is something the adults have to handle." Maddie, always the most vocal, crossed her arms. "But what if something goes wrong? What if you need a—" Rick smiled, reaching out to take the girl's hands. "You already saved me once now. It's my turn to protect you. I promise that once this is over, we'll be together again. We're a family, remember?" Rick's words seemed to soothe the girls, though worry still lingered in their eyes. Rourke observed the interaction with a blend of admiration and concern. The bond between Rick and the girls was strong, but it also complicated matters. He made a mental note to ensure that, no matter the outcome, the girls would be protected. "All right," Rourke said, returning to the subject at hand. "While Richards is gathering evidence, we need to prepare our next move, Robert, once we have the proof you need to be ready to make a surprise appearance at Thompson Tech." Rick nodded, determination shining in his eyes. "I'm ready. It's time for Emily to face the consequences of her actions." The rest of the night was spent refining the plan. Rourke worked his network, securing legal and media support for when the story broke. Rick reviewed company documents, recalling crucial details needed to regain control. Maddie and Ella, though reluctant to be sidelined, contributed their own ideas, many surprisingly insightful. Their unique street-level perspective offered angles the adults hadn't considered. As the night wore on, the atmosphere in the suite was charged with tense anticipation. Everyone knew the coming days would be critical, determining not only the future of Harding Tech, but also the fate of this improvised family. Rick looked around at the group gathered around him, feeling a surge of emotion. Just weeks ago, he had been alone, confused, and discarded in an alley. Now he was surrounded by people who genuinely cared, ready to fight by his side. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice heavy with emotion. "All of you? No matter what happens tomorrow, know that you've already given me something I thought I'd lost forever hope." Rourke smiled, placing a reassuring hand on Rick's shoulder. Maddie and Ella rushed in for a hug, their small arms wrapping around him protectively. As the group prepared for the night, each lost in their own thoughts and worries, one thing was clear. Tomorrow would be the day everything changed. The final showdown was about to begin, and the stakes had never been higher. Dawn broke with a palpable tension in the air. Rourke arrived at the hotel suite early, carrying a briefcase of surveillance gear. Rick was already up, his eyes reflecting a blend of determination and anxiety. "Morning," Rourke greeted, placing the briefcase on the table. "Ready to get started?" Rick nodded, maneuvering his wheelchair closer. "More than ready? What have we got?" Rourke opened the case, revealing a collection of sophisticated devices: hidden microphones, miniature cameras, high-definition recorders. The best money can buy. While Rourke explained how each device worked, Maddie and Ella emerged from their bedroom, eyes wide with curiosity. "Wow," Ella exclaimed, marveling at the gear. "It's like spy movies." Maddie, more pragmatic, frowned. "How are we going to use all this?" Rourke grinned, appreciating the girl's enthusiasm. "Well, the main plan is still for Dr. Richards to wear a hidden microphone when he meets with Emily, but we need more than that. We need to build a rock-solid case." Rick leaned forward, his analytical mind kicking into gear. "Right, so besides the conversation with Emily, what else do we need?" "Financial records," Rourke answered promptly. "Suspicious transfers, unauthorized deals, anything that shows Emily acted for personal gain, not the company's." Maddie cleared her throat. I can help with that." All eyes turned to her, surprised. Maddie went on, a bit hesitant. "Living on the streets, you learn to observe, to notice details. Maybe I could look around Thompson Tech's offices, see if I find anything useful." Rick immediately shook his head. "Absolutely not. That's too dangerous." But Rourke seemed thoughtful. "Actually, that could work. Sarah is small agile. She could slip into places we can't without raising suspicion." "No," Rick insisted. "I'm not putting the girls in danger." Ella, who had been quiet until then, spoke up. "Mr. Robert, we want to help. This is our family too now, remember." Rick looked at the two girls, his heart clenching. He knew they were capable, that they'd survived on their own. But the thought of risking them? Rourke put a hand on Rick's shoulder. "We'll do it safely. Sarah won't be alone. I'll be nearby keeping an eye on her, and we'll equip her with one of our Communic devices." After several minutes of heated debate, Rick finally relented, albeit reluctantly. The plan was set. While Dr. Peterson met with Liz, Maddie, discreetly accompanied by Rourke, would slip into the Harding Tech offices to look for physical evidence. The next few hours were spent in meticulous preparation. Rourke trained Maddie on how to use the surveillance gadgets, while Rick coached both girls on the company's layout and where to look for important documents. "Remember," Rick stressed, "you're looking for anything out of the ordinary unauthorized contracts, tampered financial reports, suspicious emails." Maddie nodded seriously, absorbing every word. Ella, though not participating directly in the mission, was equally alert, determined to help in any way she could. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Dr. Peterson nervously prepared for his meeting. The tiny microphone hidden in his lapel felt like it weighed a ton. At Harding Tech headquarters, Liz paced her office, her outward calm barely masking internal agitation. She knew she was close to solidifying her control, but Rick's continued absence gnawed at her. The plan was set in motion at noon. Rourke and Maddie, posing as a father and daughter taking a tour of the company, entered Harding Tech. Ella stayed behind at the hotel with Rick, monitoring communications via a secure system Rourke had set up. With her small stature and innocent demeanor, Maddie slipped through the halls unnoticed, her keen eyes taking in every detail. Her nimble fingers discreetly captured documents with a miniature camera hidden in a brooch. Rourke, keeping a safe distance, guided Maddie through an almost invisible earpiece. "Great job, Sarah. Now turn left at the next hallway. Emily's office should be the third door on the right." Maddie followed the instructions, her heart pounding, but her hands steady. Her years on the street had taught her to remain calm, under pressure. Meanwhile, in Liz's office, Dr. Peterson arrived, his face a mask of forced confidence. "Ah, Doctor," Liz greeted, her smile never reaching her eyes. "So glad you could come on such short notice." "Of course, Emily," Peterson replied, acutely aware of the microphone. What did you want to talk about? Liz leaned in, lowering her voice. We need to discuss Robert. I'm worried someone might be looking into his disappearance. Back at the hotel, Rick and Ella listened intently to the transmitted conversation. Rick felt a surge of fury at Liz's feigned concern, but forced himself to remain calm. Meanwhile, Maddie managed to slip into Liz's office, taking advantage of a moment when the secretary stepped away. With shaking yet determined hands, she rifled through drawers, photographing anything that looked important. "Good job, Sarah," Rourke's voice sounded in her earpiece. "Now be careful, getting out hilly, and Richards are coming back." Maddie froze for a moment, then quickly put everything back in place and hid behind a heavy curtain. Her heart pounded as the door opened and Liz walked in, followed by Dr. Peterson. "So it's settled," Liz was saying. "Keep up the story about Robert's mental condition. We can't afford to raise any suspicions now." Peterson nodded nervously. "And what about what we did to him? What if someone finds out?" Liz laughed coldly. "No one will find out Dr. Robert's out of the picture, and soon Thompson Tech will be entirely mine." Maddie barely dared to breathe in her hiding spot, aware she was witnessing a crucial confession. She prayed the microphone was catching every word clearly. After what felt like an eternity, Liz and Dr. Peterson finally left the office. Maddie waited a few more minutes before slipping out from behind the curtain, her legs shaking with adrenaline. "I got it," she whispered into the microphone. "I think we have what we needed." "Excellent job, Sarah," Rourke responded immediately. "Now get out of there. Meet me at the designated spot." As Maddie carefully made her way out of the building, Rick and Ella silently cheered back at the hotel. The puzzle pieces were clicking into place. Hours later, all were reunited in the hotel suite as Rourke reviewed the gathered evidence. "This is amazing," he murmured, examining the documents Maddie had photographed and listening to the recordings. "We have more than enough to bring Emily down and expose everything." Rick looked at Maddie and Ella, pride and gratitude shining in his eyes. "You two were incredible. I don't know how to thank you." Maddie beamed, for once looking her actual age. "We're a family. Remember, that's what families do." Ella nodded vigorously. "Owsley, exactly. Nobody messes with our family." Rourke watched the scene with a smile. "Well, family," he said, drawing everyone's attention, "I think it's time we plan the final strike. Emily won't know what hit her." As the group began outlining their next move, a sense of hope and determination filled the air. The truth was about to come to light, and justice would be served. For Rick, Maddie, and Ella, it was more than just taking back a company. It was about protecting their new family and building a future together. The sun had barely risen when the hotel suite was already buzzing with activity. Rourke, Rick, Maddie, and Ella were gathered around the living room table, papers scattered everywhere, half-empty coffee cups bearing witness to a long night of planning. "Okay, let's go over the plan one more time," Rourke said, his voice hoarse with fatigue but his eyes gleaming with resolve. "Robert, you'll make your entrance at the board meeting scheduled for 10 a.m. I'll be there as your legal advisor." Rick nodded, adjusting himself in his wheelchair. "Got it? And the evidence?" "It's all here," Maddie chimed in, holding up a thick folder. "Financial documents, printed emails, the recordings all sorted and ready." Rourke smiled, once again impressed by the young girl's efficiency. "Excellent work, Sarah. This is going to be crucial." Ella, who was putting together improvised first aid kits by her own insistence, looked up. "What about the press? Shouldn't we tell them too?" Rourke frowned, considering. "That's a good point, Amy, but we have to be careful if the news leaks beforehand. Emily might get ahead of us." Rick tapped his fingers on the table thoughtfully. "What if we have someone trustworthy in the media ready to go public as soon as we give the signal?" "Samantha," Rourke said suddenly. "She has media contacts. I can ask her to line things up behind the scenes." While Rourke made the call to Jennifer, Rick turned to the girls. "Sarah, Amy, you two have been amazing, but I want you to understand what comes next. Could be dangerous. You don't have to be there." Maddie crossed her arms, her expression determined. No way we came this far together. We're finishing this together. Ella nodded vehemently. That's right. We're a team now. Rick felt his heart swell with pride and worry. These girls, who had already been through so much, were ready to risk everything for him. It was a responsibility he didn't take lightly. Rourke finished his call, returning to the group with a serious expression. Guys, we have a problem. Samantha just gave me some concerning information. Everyone turned to him, tension thick in the air. It seems there's another person involved in this conspiracy, Rourke went on. Someone inside the company, someone close to Robert. Rick felt his stomach drop. Who? Rourke hesitated for a moment. Jack Wilson, your COO and best friend. A deafening silence followed. Rick closed his eyes, the pain of betrayal etched on his face. Maddie instinctively rested a comforting hand on his shoulder. How did Samantha find out? Rick finally asked, his voice trembling. She discovered emails, Rourke explained. Communications between Jack and Emily discussing the plan. Apparently Jack has been unhappy for a while, feeling undervalued. Rick shook his head in disbelief. All those years I thought we were like brothers? Ella, her young mind struggling to grasp the depth of adult betrayal, softly asked, What does that mean for our plan? Rourke took a deep breath. It means we have to be even more careful. Jack knows Robert as well as Emily does, might anticipate our moves. Maddie, always the practical one, was already rearranging documents. We need to include the evidence against Jack in the dossier that makes our case even stronger. Rick nodded slowly, pulling himself together. Sarah's right. This doesn't change our goal. It just raises the stakes. Rourke paced the room, his mind whirling. All right, new plan, Robert. Instead of heading straight for the boardroom, we'll swing by Jack's office first, catch him off guard, confront him with the evidence. If we can get him to confess, or better yet, turn on Emily, we'll have an even bigger advantage. Rick considered it for a moment before agreeing. It's risky, but it could work. Jack always did fold under pressure. The next few hours were a frenzy of activity. Rourke and Rick refined their strategy, rehearsing various scenarios. Maddie and Ella organized the evidence, creating a separate file specifically targeting Tom. As they worked, Rick couldn't help but notice how integral the girls had become. Maddie, with her keen observations and attention to detail, caught nuances the adults missed. Ella, with her natural empathy, offered insights into people's motivations. As the time for the confrontation neared, the tension in the room was palpable. Rourke did a final check of the equipment. Hidden microphones, discreet cameras, all set to capture any incriminating reactions or confessions. Rick, straightening his tie and sitting up in his wheelchair, looked around at the group. No matter what happens today, he said, his voice thick with emotion, I want all of you to know how much you mean to me. A few weeks ago, I was alone and lost. Now I have a family, people worth fighting for. Maddie and Ella rushed to embrace him, their small forms surrounding him protectively. Rourke observed with a soft smile, feeling privileged to witness such a moment. It's time, Rourke announced quietly, checking his watch. They pulled apart, exchanging determined looks. Rick took a deep breath, steadying himself. Let's do this. As they left the hotel suite, each carried not only the physical proof of their investigation, but also the weight of each other's hopes and dreams. They weren't just going to reclaim a company, they were fighting for a future, for justice, and for the family they had become. The morning sun bathed the city in golden light as Rourke's car headed toward Harding Tech. Inside the vehicle, the silence was heavy with anticipation. Rick looked out the window, taking in the familiar skyline of his company's building drawing nearer. It was time for the final showdown, time to reclaim not just his corporation, but his life. And with his new family by his side, Richard Harding felt truly invincible for the first time in a long while. The elevator ascended silently to Harding Tech's executive floor, carrying Rick, Rourke, Maddie, and Ella toward the inevitable confrontation. Rick, in his wheelchair, felt his heart pounding. The girls, one on each side, held his hands tightly, offering silent support. The doors slid open, and the group was met with shocked looks and frantic whispers. Word of Rick's arrival spread like wildfire, and employees gathered in the corridor, incredulous. Rourke led the way to Tom Baker's office. However, before they reached it, the boardroom door swung open abruptly. Liz stepped out, her face a mask of disbelief at the sight of Rick. "Robert," she gasped, her voice trembling slightly. What's happening?" Rick locked eyes with his wife, a whirlwind of memories and conflicting emotions flashing across his gaze. "Hello, Emily. We have a lot to talk about." At that moment, Tom appeared behind Liz, his face turning pale at the sight of Rick. "My God, Robert, you're alive." The tension in the corridor was palpable. Employees stood frozen, watching the scene unfold as if in slow motion. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation in private," Rourke suggested, his voice calm but firm. Liz, regaining her composure, nodded stiffly. "Yes, of course, please come in." The group entered the boardroom where the board members were waiting, stunned. Rick maneuvered his wheelchair to the head of the table, Maddie and Ella flanking him protectively. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," Rick began, his voice gaining strength. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have urgent matters to discuss." Liz and Tom exchanged nervous glances, positioning themselves on the opposite side of the table. "Robert," Liz tried, her tone conciliatory. "You must be confused. We had to make some tough decisions while you were indisposed." Rick raised a hand, silencing her. "I'm not confused, Emily. I'm perfectly lucid, and I know exactly what you and Jack have done." Tom took a step forward, his expression a mixture of fear and defiance. "Robert, my friend, you don't understand. We did what was best for the company." "Best for the company?" Rick repeated, his voice full of disbelief. "Drugging me, abandoning me in an alley, seizing control of my corporation, was that your idea of best?" The board members gasped in unison, looks of shock and horror rippling around the room. Rourke opened his briefcase and began handing out documents. "We have here detailed evidence of the conspiracy, altered financial records, incriminating emails, witness statements, everything." Liz and Tom visibly paled, exchanging panicked looks. "This is ridiculous," Liz tried to bluff. "These accusations are absurd. Robert is clearly not in his right mind." Maddie took a step forward, her small frame trembling with anger. "Stop lying. We took care of Mr. Robert after you abandoned him. We saw how he got better once the drugs wore off." The room fell into absolute silence, all eyes on the brave little girl standing up to the powerful executives. Moved by Maddie's fierce defense, Rick gently placed a hand on her shoulder before turning back to Liz and Tom. "It's over. The truth is out, confess now, and maybe we can settle this without involving the authorities." Tom, visibly shaken, looked as though he might speak, but Liz cut him off sharply. "Don't say anything, Jack, they're bluffing." That was when Ella, who had been watching carefully, noticed something. "Mr. Robert," she whispered, tugging on his sleeve. "Look at their hands." Rick followed Ella's gaze and felt his heart sink. Liz and Tom, seemingly without realizing it, had interlaced their fingers, gripping each other's hands for mutual comfort. The realization hit him like lightning. "You two," he began, his voice cracking. "It wasn't just about the company, was it, your A together?" The silence that followed was deafening. Liz and Tom glanced at each other, guilt written all over their faces. "Robert," Tom finally said, his voice trembling, "we never wanted it to be like this. It just happened." Liz, sensing the situation was spiraling out of control, changed tactics. "Yes, Robert, Jack, and I fell in love, but that has nothing to do with the company. Everything we did was for Thompson Tech." Rick felt a wave of nausea. Years of friendship, trust, and love, all destroyed in a single moment. Rourke, sensing Rick was on the brink of an emotional collapse, stepped in. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board, as you can see, we have a serious situation. I recommend that we immediately suspend Emily Thompson and Jack Wilson from their positions pending a full investigation." The board members, still reeling from the revelations, began nodding in agreement. Liz, watching her empire collapse around her, made one last desperate attempt. "You can't do this. I'm the CEO. Now I save this company." Rick, regaining his composure, looked Liz straight in the eye. "No, Emily, you saved nothing. You betrayed everything we built together for power, for greed, and for lust." At that moment, the boardroom doors swung open, and 2 police officers entered, led by Jennifer. "Emily Thompson and Jack Wilson," one officer announced, "you are under arrest for fraud conspiracy and attempted homicide." As Liz and Tom were escorted out, Rick felt a mixture of relief and profound sadness. The nightmare was over, but at an immense emotional cost. Maddie and Ella moved closer, embracing Rick quietly. Rourke placed a hand on his shoulder, offering silent support. Looking at his new, improvised family, Rick felt, for the first time in a long while, a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be challenging, but he was no longer alone. The truth had come to light, and with it, the chance for a new beginning. The weeks that followed the dramatic revelations at Harding Tech were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, endless meetings, and intense media coverage. Richard Harding, once deemed mentally unfit, was now at the center of one of the biggest corporate stories of the year. The courtroom was packed on the day Liz, Tom, and Dr. Peterson stood trial. Rick sat in the front row, Maddie and Ella by his side, their small hands clasping his in silent support. Rourke stood nearby, his face set with professional determination. When Liz entered, escorted by officers, their eyes met briefly. Rick felt a pang of hurt seeing the woman he once loved, now a cold and calculating stranger. Liz looked away first, her rigid posture betraying a mix of defiance and fear. Tom was next, looking like a hollow version of the confident man Rick once considered his best friend. His eyes were downcast, avoiding contact with everyone. Dr. Peterson came in last, visibly trembling. Unlike the other 2, his face was marked with genuine remorse. The prosecutor laid out the case with ruthless precision, detailing the elaborate conspiracy to remove Rick from power and seize control of Harding Tech. The evidence was overwhelming: incriminating emails, doctored financial records, and the damning recordings obtained by Rourke and the girls. When it was Rick's turn to testify, he maneuvered his wheelchair to the witness stand, feeling the weight of every gaze. "Mr. Thompson," the prosecutor began, "can you tell us in your own words what happened on the night you were abandoned?" Rick took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping the room before fixing on Liz and Tom. "I remember being at home arguing with Emily about the company. Jack was there too. I recall feeling dizzy, confused. The last thing I saw before losing consciousness was Emily nodding at Jack, who was holding a syringe. The courtroom broke into shocked murmurs. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order. "And then what happened, Mr. Thompson?" "I woke up in an alley alone, confused and unable to remember who I was," Rick continued, his voice thick with emotion at the memory. "If it hadn't been for Sarah and Amy, 2 brave young girls, who found me and took care of me, I might have died right there." Hearing their names, Maddie and Ella sat a little straighter, pride shining in their eyes. The trial went on with testimonies from Harding Tech employees, medical experts, and, crucially, Dr. Peterson, who agreed to testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. Finally, after days of arguments and deliberations, the verdict was announced. Liz and Tom were found guilty on all counts: conspiracy, fraud, attempted homicide, and various corporate crimes. Dr. Peterson, due to his cooperation, received a lighter sentence, but still faced years in prison and the loss of his medical license. As Liz was led away, she glanced at Rick one last time. For a brief second, he glimpsed a flicker of something. Regret? Remorse? It vanished quickly, replaced by the cold mask she had worn throughout the trial. Tom, on the other hand, looked utterly broken. Before being escorted out, he turned to Rick. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely audible. "I truly am, Robert." Rick gave no reply. Words felt inadequate in the face of such deep betrayal. Leaving the courthouse, Rick was met by a crowd of reporters. Camera flashes and shouted questions surrounded him. Rourke swiftly guided him through the throng, with Maddie and Ella forming a protective shield at his sides. Back at Harding Tech's offices, Rick faced his next battle, regaining control of his company. The board was in chaos, shareholders were antsy, and employees were disoriented. Mr. Thompson, one board member, approached him hesitantly during an emergency meeting. "We understand you've been through a terrible ordeal, but the company needs stable leadership. Now do you feel able to retake the helm?" Rick looked around the table, seeing anxious, worried faces. He felt the weight of responsibility, not just for the futures of thousands of employees, but for the legacy he had built. "Yes," he answered firmly. "I'm more than capable, and I have a new perspective on what really matters." In the days that followed, Rick worked tirelessly to stabilize the company. He met with employees, reassured investors, and began implementing changes to make Harding Tech more transparent and ethically driven. Maddie and Ella were constant presences, often watching from the sidelines of meetings, offering encouraging smiles. Their very presence was a continuous reminder of what was truly important. One evening, after a long day, Rick found the girls fast asleep on the couch in his office. He smiled gently, draping his jacket over them. Rourke entered quietly, taking in the scene. "They've really grown attached to you," he remarked. Rick nodded, his expression softening. "And I to them, I don't know what I would have done without them, without all of you." Rourke set a reassuring hand on Rick's shoulder. "You're a strong man, Robert. You've overcome unimaginable betrayal and are rebuilding not just your company, but your life." "Sometimes," Rick admitted softly, "the pain of that betrayal feels unbearable. Emily, Jack, they were my family." "And now you have a new family," Rourke replied, gesturing toward the sleeping girls. "One that chose you, that fought for you." Rick felt tears well up in his eyes. "You're right, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure they know how much they mean to me." As the two men watched the girls sleep peacefully, there was a sense that despite all the hardships, something precious had been born from the ordeal. An unlikely family, united by adversity and strengthened by mutual love. Rick knew the road ahead would still be challenging. Rebuilding trust would take time. But gazing at Maddie and Ella, he felt a genuine hope for the future. Justice had been served. Now it was time to heal, to rebuild, and above all, to treasure the family he had found in the most improbable of circumstances. The judge's family courtroom was decorated with colorful drawings and photos of smiling families. Richard Harding adjusted his tie nervously, while Maddie and Ella, wearing their best dresses, held his hands. Rourke stood beside them, an encouraging smile on his face. "Mr. Thompson," the judge began, peering over his glasses, "I understand you wish to adopt Sarah and Amy. Given the unusual nature of this situation, we've conducted a thorough investigation into your circumstances." Rick nodded, his heart racing. The past few weeks had been a roller coaster of paperwork and interviews, but nothing mattered more than making official the bond he'd formed with the two girls who had saved his life. The judge continued, a small smile forming. "I must say, Mr. Thompson, I rarely encounter such a clear case of a family that belongs together. It is my pleasure to approve this adoption." The courtroom exploded in joy. Maddie and Ella sprang from their seats, throwing their arms around Rick with all their might. Rourke clapped, unshed tears gleaming in his eyes. "Congratulations, S. Thompson," the judge said, handing over the official paperwork. "You are now officially a family." Leaving the courthouse, Rick felt lighter than he had in years. Maddie and Ella skipped ahead, already excitedly discussing how to decorate their new bedrooms. "So, Dad," Maddie said, testing the new word with a shy smile, "what do we do now?" Rick felt his heart swell at hearing Dad. "Well, my dear, now we celebrate, and then, well, we have a world to change." In the weeks that followed, the once cold Harding mansion filled with new life. Rooms were painted bright colors, laughter echoed through the halls, and the smell of homemade cookies, thanks to Ella's baking adventures, often drifted through the air. For Rick, though, the real transformation was in his heart. Every one of Maddie's smiles, every one of Ella's hugs, healed a little more of the wounds left by Liz and Tom's betrayal. One evening, while the newly formed family had dinner with Rourke, now a frequent guest, Rick shared an idea. "Girls, Frank," he began, "I've been thinking a lot about our journey, about how we found each other, and I can't help thinking about all the other kids out there like you two once were with no home, no hope." Maddie and Ella exchanged looks, their eyes full of understanding. Rick continued, his voice gathering enthusiasm. "I want to use Thompson Tech resources to make a difference. I'm thinking of starting a foundation focused on helping homeless children." Rourke nodded approvingly. "That's a wonderful idea, Robert. With your influence and resources, you could make a real impact." "Can we help?" Ella asked eagerly. "We know lots of kids still on the streets. We could talk to them, show them there's hope." Rick smiled, proud of his daughter's compassion. "Of course you can help. In fact, I want you to be an integral part of this project. Who better to understand those kids' needs than you?" Over the next few months, the New Beginnings Foundation took shape. Rick leveraged his connections to gather support from other corporations and public figures. Maddie and Ella, with their first-hand experience, were instrumental in creating programs that truly met the needs of homeless children. The foundation not only provided shelter and food, but also education, job training, and psychological support. Rick insisted that every child be treated with dignity and respect, giving them a real chance at a better future. Meanwhile, Rick implemented significant changes at Harding Tech. The company, once focused solely on profits, now embraced a new philosophy of social responsibility. At a board meeting, Rick presented his vision. "Ladies and gentlemen, Thompson Tech has the opportunity and the obligation to be more than just a profitable company. We can be a force for good." He outlined plans for sustainability programs, diversity initiatives, and a commitment to using technology to address social problems. Some board members were skeptical. Mr. Thompson once said, "I understand your philanthropic enthusiasm, but our primary responsibility is to our shareholders." Rick smiled. "I agree we have a responsibility to our shareholders, but I argue that in the long run, an ethical and socially responsible company not only does good, but also thrives in the market. Today's consumers demand more of the businesses they support." Gradually, Rick's vision began to take root. Harding Tech launched innovative products centered on sustainability and accessibility. The company became a leader in ethical labor practices and employee wellness programs. One day, as Rick strolled through the newly opened community center of the New Beginnings Foundation, he found himself reflecting on the incredible journey. Maddie and Ella were just ahead, showing the facilities to a group of newly arrived kids. Rourke approached, watching the scene alongside Rick. "You've built something amazing here, Robert, something that goes far beyond yourself." Rick nodded, a profound sense of fulfillment washing over him. "You know, Frank, when I look back on everything that happened, the betrayal being abandoned, it's easy to feel bitter. But then I look at Sarah and Amy, see the work we're doing here, and I realize sometimes the worst situations lead to the best opportunities." Right then, Maddie called out, "Dad, come meet our new friends." Rick smiled, wheeling himself toward his daughters. As he neared the group of children, he recognized something in their eyes. Hope. The same hope Maddie and Ella had given him at his darkest moment. "Hello, everyone," he said warmly. "Welcome to your new beginning." As the kids gathered around him, some shy, some curious, Rick felt a wave of gratitude. He had lost so much, yet gained infinitely more, a family, a purpose, and the chance to make a real difference in the world. The future, once so uncertain, now shone with possibilities. And Richard Harding, along with his daughters and their new friends, was ready to embrace it with open arms.